Hey guys, Mr. Antoon here. Chapter 11, sections 5 and 6, the last two. This one's on decision making for Congress. So let's talk about, or I'll show you a political cartoon that will really show you what Congress looks like over the last 50, 60 years, 70 years. Sorry, my math is off. But you can see the stars on Stars and Stripes are divided. We're not together. We don't work together. We don't compromise as much. Pretty good cartoon to kind of give you the synopsis of it. Now, they would say we work together, but they would tell the media, and what we see as people is that they're completely blocking the other side. It's both sides. Okay? So let's watch this quick video that shows you from Business Insider about how divided it's become, and you guys can you'll see how it works. Watch the connection. They're working together. You can see them tied together. You go across the aisle, look for the middle. When you see a red or blue dot go across, we're working on it. Creating legislation together. And then here's where it starts to become very partisan. You'll see a blue dot on the right and a red dot on the left. Alarmed by that, but again, that's kind of the overview for it. So let's talk about checks and balances. You can see what Congress does. They have legislative oversight. Any money that goes anywhere in our country, they can look into to see if it was handled correctly. This is their power. They confirm presidential appointments. So if Supreme Court officials Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh were both recently appointed, but they had to be confirmed by the Senate. The Senate has that power, not the House, but Congress has the power to check the president and who they put in there. Advise and consent. So this is the ability to say, we're going to advise you to do something, and we'll give you consent to do that, especially to the president. They can override the veto. Both houses have to have two-thirds vote to override, and they're the ones who deal with impeachment. The House deals with bringing charges, and the Senate deals with removing them from office, or at least the trial. And then appropriations, they always deal with the money side of it. So that we talked about veto. So what is the veto one referring to? Here are the presidential vetoes, as you can see from 1981 to the present. I think this one's updated, but you can see here from Jimmy Carter, Reagan had a lot. You can see the overrides. Barack Obama had one. Trump hasn't had any at this point where they've overridden him, but he hasn't had a lot of vetoes because he's had the House for 2 years and the Senate for 4 of his 4 years. So it hasn't been much in terms of what he needs to do in terms of that to check them. But you can see here, again, the veto override, which we more emphasize here. Can you hopefully see the veto one, which is in yellow there? And then going back to 1901, look at FDR during the New Deal stuff and the Depression. He tried as hard as possible to get his stuff passed during that time. Very powerful president. Won 4 terms in office. And then again, you can see this is the one that happened on Obama, and I wanted to go through this. Congress votes to override Obama's veto. Obama vetoed the 9/11 bill because the bill itself allows Americans who were affected by 9/11 to sue another country. But what that opens us up to is they can now sue us. So there's a big concern with that, and that's why he overrode it. But that's why Obama vetoed it, but Congress overrode him. And what would be the problem with this is you could see that now the GOP, especially McConnell, blamed Obama for the flaws in the law he vetoed. So he's blaming Obama. He didn't write the law. He just vetoed the law. So it's really interesting to see how you play the game, guys, the politics of that game. The impeachment process, another check and balance. As you can see here, there's an act. So the president, a judge, commits some impeachable act called high crimes, felonies, or treason. I'll tell you about Trump's in a second. The House now investigates that, and they interview witnesses, but the GOP bloc, the Senate, blocked all witness hearings. Give me 1 second. How do I pause? So in a situation like this, there was no trial, no hearings at all for any witnesses. So they're just saying, I'm not going to vote against Trump, the Republican president. So the Republican Senate, the majority, voted at a 51% not to impeach. Actually, you needed more than that. You need 66%, 2/3, to kick out of office. So that's what the Senate is for. And you can see the Senate's the next part of it. The Senate then directs the proceedings like a court case, and you need 67%. So the House, which was Democrat, voted to impeach at a simple majority, and then a supermajority for the Senate, and it didn't happen under Trump. And then they come up with a verdict. They can do three possibilities: guilty, they have to leave; acquittal, not guilty, nothing happens. And they can even censure the president, which means before he would tweet anything or do anything, he'd have to have somebody watching over him in a sense. So how many presidents at this point have been impeached? Your answer should be 3. But are these the presidents? That's Andrew Johnson on the left. Okay, he appointed his own Secretary of War, I think it was at the time, and the House did not like him, so they impeached him. Clinton lied to Congress, and Nixon. What happened to Nixon? Nixon was going to be impeached and removed, is what he heard, so he quit. So Trump is the third one there. And again, if you don't know what happened with Trump, again, impeached is the most recent one. So we've had 2 presidents in our lifetime be impeached out of the 3. It's showing you what's happening in these modern times, guys. So here are the 2 that he got impeached on. Abuse of power. That means he used his office to try to affect the election or affect, help on the next election. So this had to do with Ukraine and talking to the president, whereas Trump called it a perfect call. He seemed to be pressuring him. I'll give you money to help you out if you help me find dirt on Biden. And this is a big no-no. Again, he was charged with all these things, but again, he was never removed from office. Article 2 is obstruction of Congress, trying to stop them from moving stuff forward in terms of blocking. So again, those are the 2 articles that he was under. And you could see here when the whips whipped up the vote, this is at the same exact time last year in September that we're talking right now. And you could see how many people were ready to impeach. This is the House. So the whips were whipping up the vote. And you can see again, just who supports an impeachment inquiry. Most Republicans said no. At this point, you can see, and all the Democrats said yes. You can see how partisan we actually were. Okay, I'm not going to go through all this, but you can pause at any time to see anything. So there's the official impeachment process, guys. We don't have to really know the specifics of it. Just understand it's a check and balance on the president from Congress, because we're talking about Congress. And again, another one of those graphics that kind of show you, here, watch, I'll show you. Sarcastic song for this. So it's showing you our country and how it's getting squashed here, right? Showing you how we're starting to spread and go to the polar opposite. You can see the different things that I'm showing you here. By party, 9/11 hits, and what happens? We come together.
Nothing you can sing,
and then
Obama. Nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy.
One more, and then Trump.
Nothing you can make that can't be made. No one you can save that can't be saved. Nothing you can do, but you can learn how to be you in time. It's easy.
I don't really need to play all of them, guys, but it's from
All you need is love.
All right, I'm going to end that side of it. All right, so we're done with 5. Just know that graphic, guys. That's a really good one where they did a poll of how we feel. And that is us reflecting how our government is. So it's really coming down from the government and really kind of informing us how we should act. And again, we don't like the other side. We're very opposite. And that's not what we really are. We're Americans, and we should find a way to do it. But it doesn't seem to be happening from the top. 11.6, the last one, is just understanding Congress. There are things I want to go over here. This is stuff that's really not there, but you need to know about. It's the bad word called gerrymandering. Really, the official word is redistricting, okay? This is the official term that every 10 years, and I'll go through this in a second, but you could see the donkey and the elephant trying to paint the country based on House of Representatives here. So a census occurs every 10 years. We're in the middle of one right now. They're tallying the votes. And this will help us with a lot of things like taxes, voting, seats in the House of Representatives. But you could see going back to this one, again, some of the percent of the population, you can see where it says white alone. I think it says that because it's really small. But again, you're gauging the stuff from the last census in 2010 because things are going to change here. Texas is probably going to get a lot of seats. Then from census, it's a reapportionment. 435 seats in the House of Representatives never changes, but the states ebb and flow or get some and lose some, gain or lose. And in this situation, you're going to see those are the 435 across our nation. You can see here after apportionment who gained and lost in 2010. We gained 4 seats, the most of any state, because in the Sun Belt, which is the southern part of the United States, everyone's starting to move there because they're getting sick of the winters. So prior to 2000, we had 32 or 30 House members. In 2000, prior to that, then we jumped up 2 more in the House, and then 2010 we jumped up 4 more. We're right now 36 House and 38 total, which is the electoral votes, which is very, very important. 2020, I'm going to say we're at least getting 2. I'm guessing. Then there's a thing called redistricting. Each state legislature, this is part of federalism, will get the opportunity to go ahead and redraw the lines. And if you're the majority party, like in Texas, it's conservative or Republicans, they get to draw the lines. So if there's a stronghold of Democratic support in Austin or San Antonio or Dallas or Houston, they're going to what they call gerrymander it. And I'll give you a couple videos on that to give you a background to it. This is the bad word. Redistricting should be the official one, but when it looks skewed up and only to favor one party or the other, this is playing politics big time. So, big question you're going to ask with gerrymandering is, do we choose our representatives or do they choose us? Because in a republic, a democratic republic, we're supposed to choose our representatives, not they choose us. So you could see the congressional methods, the red color, you can see it's state legislatures. But in California, it's an independent commission, meaning it's not supposed to be conservative and liberal. It's somebody doing it fair. There's a computer program that can do it today that I'll have another video to show you. But let's watch the background on the apportionment. By the Census Bureau.
We, the people of the United States.
The mandate for the census is right here. Just a few sentences into the Constitution.
Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states, according to their respective numbers.
Apportionment. The dividing of seats in the House of Representatives among the 50 states. But how does it actually work? Since the 1940 census, Congress has used the method of equal proportions, which follows this formula.
A sub n equals P over the square root.
Okay, don't worry about the math. Just think of the formula as an apportioning machine. First, the Constitution calls for each of the 50 states to have at least 1 seat. So subtract 50 from the current House total of 435 and you have 385 seats left. Next, the apportionment machine ranks the states by population according to the census. Then the machine starts giving out seats. After each seat is distributed, the machine re-ranks the remaining states based on the formula until all seats are distributed. This process ensures that each congressional district from Maryland to California has roughly the same number of people. In 1790, each House member represented only about 34,000 people. In 2000, each member represented on average 647,000 people. Since the first census, the decennial count has been the basis for our representative form of government. And as our country grows, the apportionment process ensures equal representation for all, just like the Founding Fathers planned. Apportionment, another gift from our nation's founders, who transformed the census from a tool of government into a tool of empowerment for the people.
All right, that was a pretty good video in terms of kind of giving us the overview, and that was done by our own government. So it's just giving you how they do it, how they give out the seats. So from census, we go to reapportionment, then redistricting. Please know that pattern there. This one's going to talk about the basics of Not too much depth on gerrymandering because we're going to do the activity in class. But again, another video. It's only a minute 15. I'm trying to give you a background to it.
Political power in Congress is based around population. Bigger states, like California and Texas, are rewarded with more seats than smaller states, like Rhode Island and Delaware. Since our population is constantly changing, people move, have babies, die, the Constitution requires that a census be held every 10 years to count the people of each state. Census numbers are used in the process of reapportionment to determine how many of the 435 congressional seats each state gets. As states grow in population, they get more seats, and they take those seats from states that have grown less quickly. After each reapportionment, every state must alter the boundaries of their congressional districts to account for these changes. This is called redistricting. The United States is the only advanced democracy in the world where politicians directly participate in the districting process. Why does this matter? You live in a district. Many districts, actually. Congressional, state senate, assembly, city council, school. Everyone in America lives in districts. All districts are bounded by lines. The way district lines are drawn can determine who represents you for decades at a time.
Okay, so that gives you kind of an overview on it. So let's talk a little bit more. So you could see here the role of party identification. Sorry, that was my timer. So the parties draw the districts. State legislature. So look at the Senate and the House here in Texas. It's Republican. It's slowly moving the other way, meaning we're kind of getting more of a balance, but it's probably most likely going to be that way. And again, they look at that. That's the 114th Congress, congressional districts, meaning the federal government. It's different today to some degree, but again, it's showing you how in a rural area, there are larger swaths of land because there's less people living in there's no, the density is less as opposed to a city. So you're just seeing how the party has that power. That's why state legislatures are very, very powerful when it comes to voting for them. And you can see here again, just a different way of looking at it. Most of the ones not in the city are rural. This has changed, but I'm just showing you the graphics in order for you to understand it. And there's Austin. And I'll show you and explain to you Austin, how it's cut up, because it looks a little different than it does now, or there. This is the gerrymandering index in the 113th Congress, just showing you the darker the color, darker black, meaning it's more gerrymandered. So the southern part of Texas, which a lot of Democrats would live in, is gerrymandered more because the Republican state legislatures get to draw that. You can see Arizona. You can see a lot of the Southeast and the Northeast gerrymandered, whether it's Democrat state legislatures or Republican. Now, hopefully you could figure out why those states in the North, like Montana, are grayed out, or even Maine, because they only have one House seat. That's it. Population is so low. Maine has a little different situation. I think they have 5 electoral votes, 5 districts, but they split it up based on what they want to do. And I don't think it's gerrymandered at all. So here's another one on how gerrymandering can impact the election. This is a little longer. It's a 4-minute one.
Most people have heard the word gerrymandering once or twice, probably during a presidential election. What exactly is gerrymandering? Essentially, it's the process of giving one political party an advantage over another political party by redrawing district lines. It's like Democrats trying to gain an advantage over Republicans, or Republicans trying to gain an advantage over Democrats. You see, each party wants to gain as many districts as possible so they can do things like control the state budget or set themselves up to win even more districts in the future. So, to understand how this process began and how it continues today, we must go back to 1812 in Massachusetts. Elbridge Gerry, the governor of Massachusetts, supported and signed a bill to allow redistricting. That is, redrawing the boundaries that separate districts. The catch? The new lines would favor Gerry's own political party, the Democratic-Republican Party, which no longer exists. You see, Gerry wanted his party to win as many state Senate seats as possible. The more members of your party who vote, the more likely you are to win an election. The new lines were drawn to include loads of areas that would help Governor Gerry in the future. They were so strange looking that someone said the new districts looked like a salamander. The Boston Gazette added Jerry's name to the word salamander, and voila! Gerrymandering, the process of dividing up and redrawing districts to give your political party an advantage. So how exactly does someone go about protecting their own political party and actually gerrymandering a district? There are two successful practices: packing a district and cracking a district. Packing is the process of drawing district lines and packing in your opponents like cattle into as few districts as possible. If more districts equals more votes, the fewer the districts there are, the fewer votes the opposition party will get. Packing, then, decreases the opponent's voter strength and influence. Cracking is the opposite, taking one district and cracking it into several pieces. This is usually done in districts where your opponent has many supporters. Cracking spreads these supporters out among many districts, denying your opponent a lot of votes. When you have a large number of people who would generally vote for one type of party, those folks are known as a voting bloc. Cracking is a way to break that all up. So when would a party choose to pack their opponent's districts rather than crack them? Well, that really depends on what the party needs. To dilute your opponent's voters, you could pack them into one district and leave the surrounding districts filled with voters of your own party. Or, if you and your party are in power when it's time to redraw district lines, you could redraw districts and crack up a powerful district and spread your opponent's voters out across several neighboring districts. So, Governor Jerry in 1812 wanted to gain an advantage for his party and redrew district lines in his state in such a crazy way, we have a whole new word and way of thinking about how political parties can gain advantages over their opponents. Politicians think of creative ways to draw districts every few years. So, the next time an election comes around and politicians ask people to vote, be sure to look up the shape of your district and the districts that surround it. How wide does your district stretch across your state? Are all of the districts in your state relatively the same shape? How many other districts does your district touch? But always be sure to ask yourself, does my district look like a salamander?
Sorry. Anyways, hope you're starting to get the basics of that, guys. So I'm going to give you a scenario, and then we're going to do the activity in class. So let's say we have this rectangle land, and there's 50 people. 60% of them are blue, and 40% are red. How do I get it where blue wins? And how do I draw the lines to redistrict? And to be fair, there should be more blue representatives than red. That'd be the fair way to do it. This is, again, to show you. Here's how I would draw the line straight down, okay? Straight down, fair representation. A red representative would represent the red people. And you could see the same with the blue, okay? How do I get it where blue wins all of them? Where this is completely setting it up, I draw horizontal lines. As you can see this, it's 5 representatives for blue and none for red. That is not fair whatever way you look at it, okay? How do I get it where red wins? You can get red to win here, and this is where you're gerrymandering the district. So there's cracking a district, which means dividing the opponents into other districts like you would do in the second one. It's compact, but it's unfair. And then packing it is you're putting them all into one, and like they're doing here with how the red would win 3 districts. So they're putting all the blue into 1 or 2, and then they're dividing it up so it makes the red win and have the majority in those. Again, this is how it usually goes because there is political power, and this is how you play the game. Politics. There's political power in state legislatures because they need to deal with majority vote, the power with money, federalism with grants, all that stuff come into play here, guys. Oh, and they must be contiguous, which means they have to be connected. You can't put an island of blue by itself and then say that little island connects to this one way down here. You can't do that. Okay, so what happens in Austin? This is kind of the Austin map. I know you can see the map in the background. You could see the 31st is way up there, Republican, the northern part, Round Rock, Cedar Park, Leanderish area. Then you could see Lloyd Doggett is the only Democrat here in 35th. You can see Michael McCall is the 10th. That's where I live. You could see 25th, which is Roger Williams, and that is where Westlake is. And then Chip Roy is 21. All of these guys are up for re-election every 2 years. So this is completely cracked and packed. The cracked districts where you take Austin, this block of voters in Austin, this blue block, and you crack it up. And then you put as many as you can into the 35th. And why it's called the 35th is because it goes right along the 35 freeway all the way to San Antonio and then cracks up that city. And it cracks and packs them into the 35th. And that's how they get away with it. Again, you're seeing it from 2002 to 2004. There's the 35th district that goes all the way down to the coast, but this is old, 16 years ago. I'm just showing you how they do it. So here's the 35th. It is referred to as, it goes all the way from Austin to San Antonio along the 35. And this is how they crack and pack them into one, okay? This is known as the upside down elephant. Can you see it? Let me help you out. Can you see the upside down elephant? Just turn your head. Hey, there are the ears, there's the trunk, there's the feet. You get it. Hopefully you see it somewhat. So let's look at some of the bad ones. Again, I just wanted to show you what it looks like. There's Austin. Those are counties, but again, it's dividing it up. I'm not going to go through a lot of this. So here's the most gerrymandered districts in our country. North Carolina and Florida. You can see, again, Florida the second time. Pennsylvania. Illinois and Florida for the third time. But now you're starting to see how big Florida is as a state. So if the state legislature is Republican, they control drawing those lines, and they can guarantee presidential wins year to year. It's interesting. Illinois, second one there. Look at that one. It's like one little road on the left-hand side connects this top part to the bottom part. Totally not fair, but that's how they pack a district, by cracking it, cracking up the Democratic stronghold. There's Maryland, 3, and I'm going to show you Maryland's evolution because this is a crazy one. So there's the 1953, the 83rd Congress. There's Maryland, and then look at it evolve. It's pretty crazy. To the point where it's like, I don't even know what that looks like. Looks like a finger on the left guy pointing like this. Anyways, this is gerrymandering, guys, and it's gone to the Supreme Court to some degree. Somebody even created a Jerry font, like a gerrymandering font. I should do our whole presentation. Look at that. That says gerrymander at the top. I thought this was really cool, but I'm not going to do it to you guys. I promise. So there are ways, the ways that you can see this. You could skip this video if you want, but this is telling you a solution to it called the shortest split line. And I think it's interesting enough to get us in our minds. This guy also talks about a lot of stuff using animals, but just get the basics of what it is. It's only a 3-minute video, but I wanted you to see it so you get an idea of what we can do to stop this from happening.
But it's a very interesting way of dividing up voters into boundaries, into different districts. So I wanted to spend a little bit more time going into depth with it here. So this is the sample population I used in the main gerrymandering video. There are about 40 voters here, and I wanted to divide them up into 8 different groups. Now when you have an easy number, it's a pretty simple thing to do. You find the line that divides them into 2 equally populous groups, and you use the shortest line if you have multiple lines that will do the same thing. So there are 20 voters on the left, and there's 20 voters on the right. Then you take each of those 2 groups and you do the same thing again. You find the shortest line that will divide the 2 populations into equal sized groups. So now there's 10 in each group. And ultimately we want 8 voting ranges here, so we divide them one more time. And you end up with 8 equally sized ranges, each with 5 votes. And that's the basics of the shortest split line method. Just always use the shortest line you can to divide the 2 groups. But the question that naturally comes up is, what if you have an odd number of districts? If you want to divide them into 7 groups instead of into 8 groups. This is where the cleverness of this shortest split line method comes up. Because if you take 7 divided by 2, you don't get a round number, you get 3.5. But what you do is you take that 3.5 and you round it up to get 4 and down to get 3. And this tells you the ratio that you want to draw the line at for the population. So you want to draw a line that divides the population into a 4-3 ratio. For every 4 voters in one group, you want 3 voters in the other group. So as best I can tell, this is the shortest line that will divide this population of voters into a 4-3 ratio. Let's just double check. There's 24 voters on the left, there are 18 voters on the right. 24 divided by 18 gives us 1.3, and 4 divided by 3 gives us 1.3. We've drawn this line in the right spot. The next step is to take that ratio, that 4-3 ratio, and that actually tells you how many districts you then want to divide each of these separate groups into. So on the left-hand side, we want to take that group of voters and divide them into 4 equally sized groups. Now that's really easy to do because we have an even number. So we find the shortest line to divide them into 2 equal sized groups, and then do it once again. Now we have our 4 groups on the left, each of which has 6 voters inside of it. Now to divide up the group that's on the right, we do the same thing that we did with the number 7. Take 3, divide it by 2, you get 1.5. Round 1.5 up, you get 2. Round 1.5 down, you get 1. So we want to divide that group into a 2-1 ratio. Finding the shortest line that will do that should be this line. We can just double check our math again. There are 12 voters in the top, 6 voters in the bottom. 12 divided by 6 gives us 2. 2 divided by 1 gives us 2. So we know we've drawn that line in the correct spot. And again, that ratio tells us how many districts we actually want to draw among these remaining areas. So that bottom one is 1. We're done there, right? That has 6 voters. There's nothing more to do with that bottom district. The district that's 2, it's an even number, so that's easy. We want to make 2 districts out of here, just divide it in half. There's the shortest line that will give us 6 voters on each side. And now at the end of that method, we have 7 equally populous districts that were drawn with the shortest lines possible to create those districts.
So I hope you guys are seeing this. This is kind of taking out politics from it. And that's just one way of doing it. There's another one that has like a supercomputer that would do it. This is the Washington Post current. Washington Post did this. And the current congressional district map looks like that. Whether it's, gerrymandered or not. That's what it is. This is a computer drawn map that did like 1 billion different maps of what it looks like. Do you notice it's not as jagged? And it's fair. Based on the percentage of your state, you're still going to be the majority. If it's Republican in your state of Texas, you're going to have more representatives that are Republican. It's just a way to do that. Or more districts that should be Republican. There's SCOTUS cases that are at the Supreme Court where they have to deal with issues of gerrymandering. They really don't directly answer them as much as they should. But again, those are some of the questions that they had to answer. And again, this is an algorithm used to solve partisan gerrymandering. And it's using a supercomputer. So here we go on this one. Didn't work. There it is.
Every 10 years after the census, states redraw the borders of their legislative districts. In most states, politicians get to control that process, and if they're clever about how the districts are drawn, they can make it easier for their own party to win more of them. It's called partisan gerrymandering, and it's bad for democracy, but the Supreme Court hasn't intervened in decades.
The Supreme Court has yet to settle on a standard or definition of political fairness. They just simply don't want to declare a partisan gerrymander without some way to measure them.
That's what Cho's research team is trying to fix with a supercomputer.
So we're trying to build a measurement tool to help the court measure whether political parties have manipulated a map to gain an unfair advantage.
In other words, they're making a gerrymandering ruler.
So when you redistrict, there's a phenomenal degree of possible manipulation. Almost any shape you want to make is possible.
That's led to a bunch of oddly shaped districts.
And the court wants to be able to determine the intent behind the district maps. Basically, they want to read the mind of the map drawer. It doesn't have any way to do this.
The team started developing their tool by identifying what criteria are important to the court.
Some criteria are required by law. For instance, we have to have about the same number of people in every district, and all districts have to be contiguous.
Contiguous just means they can't be broken up into a bunch of pieces, with some exceptions.
The court wants districts that preserve political subdivisions like cities, counties, municipal boundaries. So whenever you find an identifiable community of like-minded individuals, the court likes it when those people are kept together in the same district.
Wendy's team is using a supercomputer to generate district maps based on those criteria.
So we can create 1 million or 1 billion maps using only the criteria required by law and the traditional districting principles. And we don't use any political information. So these are by definition nonpartisan maps because they don't use political information.
If the current map doesn't look like any of the possibilities generated by the algorithm, that's a good indication a partisan gerrymander has occurred.
If 1 billion different possible maps without partisan bias are all very different from the map the court is evaluating, then the Supreme Court has some evidence that partisanship was part of the motivation behind an alleged partisan gerrymander. If we then have the computer draw another 1 billion maps where we code in partisan information in addition to the traditional districting principles, and those maps do appear similar to the map in question, the Supreme Court could rightly infer partisan motivation.
Right now, there's no guarantee that this particular algorithm will ever be used as evidence in a court argument. but a handful of cases stand a real chance to make it to the court in the near future. One of them, Whitford versus Gill, deals with a Republican-drawn map for Wisconsin, where Republicans won 48.6% of the vote in 2012, but won 61% of the state assembly seats that year. The court has struggled to identify a test for partisan gerrymandering. But this time around, Cho's project and others like it will make it harder for the justices to keep putting it off.
All right, guys, again, those two videos you didn't have to really know, but again, that's it for all of Chapter 11. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you on the next one.